It's 10:30. I've just started the recording of the meeting and I'll hand over to you, Councillor Cottier.
Right. Good morning, everybody, to the Environment and Overview Scrutiny Committee for the 23rd of June. This is our first virtual meeting. Hopefully it will go well. I'm John Cottier and I will be chairing the committee today. First off, I would like to thank Kesteven for all his hard work running the committee and we wish him a speedy recovery. We'll move on to the agenda. Is any comments from the members of the public?
Not from me, Anne Gaither.
No, not from me either, but hello and thanks for letting us on. Mike Turner. Cheers.
Okay, I'll pass across to Jack for doing the register of attendances. Jack?
Thank you, Chair. If members could respond after I read out their name, just let me know if they're present. And I'll start with Councillor Cottier.
I'm here.
Councillor Baxter.
Here.
Councillor Dilks.
Present.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
And then we have apologies for Councillor Manterfield. So I'll go on to Councillor Smith.
Here.
And then we have substitutes. I believe we have Councillor Ray Wootton.
Present.
And Councillor Linda Wootton.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay. We move across to disclosure of interests. Anybody got anything to disclose for this meeting? I'll take that as a no. Okay, we move on to item 4. Action notes from the meeting on the 25th of February. Quite a lot of these will be on hold due to the present crisis. And I take it Zena's not with us anymore.
Sorry about that. I hadn't realised my microphone was still muted. So the first item is just to confirm the accuracy of the notes from the last meeting, and then we'll go through any updates from the previous meeting that any councillors have any questions on. So I'll hand back to you for the confirming the accuracy of the notes.
Okay. Okay, so we go through page by page for the accuracy of the notes. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10.
Yes. On page 10, I think it's on page 10, Chair, we were told that information about rewilding had been brought to the committee because the committee had requested it. I believe that may have been what was said at the meeting, but certainly this committee had not requested information about rewilding. We had asked for something else. Sorry, it's at the top of page 11. It's the second bullet point down. Officers explained that they were asked by the committee to look at grass and meadow rewilding. They were not asked by the committee. They may have been asked by the chair of the committee or by the portfolio holder or by somebody else entirely, but there is no evidence that they were asked by the committee.
Okay. Zena, can we change that, please?
We can, if you, the notes from the November 29 meeting say that officers were asked to consult with Environment SK and report back to the committee with examples and indicative costs for introducing managed wildflower biodiversity areas in the district.
Yeah, that's not the same thing as rewilding.
Okay, it might just be a misunderstanding of the different terms.
I'm sure it is.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a query on the same page.
Right, that's page 11, isn't it? Or
It's
page 10?
page 11, yes.
Right.
Should I go? Yeah.
So page 10 is actually right. Page 11 is the one that actually you both were talking about. So it's page 11 we're dealing with, not page 10. Because Phil was on about page 10 being a problem. Okay, Phil, what have you got a problem with page 11?
Yes, on the first, thank you, on the first bullet point, it says quite rightly that members express their support for the introduction of proposed rewilding areas, one for each town. That's absolutely right, but there was a strong proviso on that, and you know, I remember it vividly. I asked straight away that there should be consultation with the parish council and Jubilee Park, where one of the sites was going to be. That's important because I have to say, after the meeting, I publicised it on Facebook. I was pleased that we were doing this and investigating the possibility. I got into an almighty row as to how dare you suggest this without any consultation. So I was able to go back and say, well, you know, I was reassured that there would be and there will be some, you know, proper consultation on this. And then secondly, if I can, just moving down the bullet points, I just think the minute the minute has missed the point where its members were asked if there was potential for the council to do more to protect trees, referring to the requirement for one sapling to be planted in place of any mature tree that had to come down. The point that I was raising there was that there was if a 150-year-old tree has to come down, the only requirement is that one sapling is thrown in the ground. What I was saying was, could that be increased? Is there a way of increasing that? I'm just a bit disappointed that that point wasn't picked up, and I would like to pursue it, you know, at a later meeting or later in this one. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, page 12. Someone to put forward the minutes.
Are we proposing to accept the action notes?
Zena?
So it would be a proposal to accept the action notes pending those changes.
Yes, please.
With those changes, I'll be happy to propose that.
I'll second it.
Okay. Those four? Because there's so few of us. Do I need to pass it back to Jack for doing a...
It's up to you, Councillor Cottier. You can run through the list of names to see if people are for or against, or you can just go, but because we're not a decision-making committee, you can just say, is there general agreement for that recommendation, or just, does anyone not agree with that?
Okay, does anyone else agree with the minutes going forward?
Chairman abstained as we weren't at the meeting.
Right.
I wasn't at the meeting either, Chairman. But I have no objection to the minutes going forward, but I wasn't there.
Okay, well, that's then carried then. Moving on to item 5, which is updates from previous meetings. Zena?
Chair, were there any particular actions that you would like updates on? So there's a number of officers in the meeting who would be able to provide updates on the specific items that you would like updates on.
I know a lot of our updates are actually impending due to the COVID pandemic. So quite a lot of them are actually just on hold until that's actually been put forward. I know that our single-use plastic initiative is kind of again on hold due to the same thing. So in which case, does anybody else want any updates on the actions?
Yes, please.
Okay, Phil. Ashley.
Ashley. Phil, did you want to go? I didn't.
No, mistake, my part.
Right, okay. On page 5, we've talked about this in the past, environmental performance indicators. I note it's in the work plan to review performance against the indicators, but we haven't yet agreed the indicators. I realise that people have been seconded to other places and it's been a busy time with COVID and so on, but I really don't understand why a simple set of environmental performance indicators couldn't have been put into the form of a report and presented to this meeting. Can anybody explain why that hasn't happened?
Would you like me to weigh in here, John?
Please.
just as a thing, there was a big fat silence there, so I thought basically everybody was looking at.
Peter, anyway.
This is I absolutely agree with Ashley that at some point we do need to look at look at a better way of or a way of presenting in a continuous basis the performance of certain environmental initiatives that the council partake in. Well, I don't believe it was included in the agenda setting meeting, mainly because there were other things on there, such as the licensing, and we were looking at some rewilding initiatives. And at that particular time, officers were redeployed in other areas. We're only just coming out, whilst we sit in a different place right now where there are more officers available, we still need to bear in mind that in the background there's an awful lot of emergency planning and an awful lot of redeployment that's still happened, and councillors might not be aware of the extent of that. So we have to be aware of the finite resource that we have from our officers to generate reports for committees. That's becoming more and more as we start to move into the recovery phase, but at the time that we set the agenda that wasn't the case, and I think it's probably an opportune moment to get it firmly in a forward plan for a specific meeting, so that the officers can then generate the correct reporting and we can have that debate.
Chairman, I won't continue with, I hope that we'll have a report with a proposed set of environmental performance indicators soon, because I think I've been asking for this for about a year now. But even though I have sent some suggested environmental performance indicators as requested at the last meeting, I've had no feedback from officers whatsoever, or members for that matter, as to whether or not the suggestions I've made will either be adopted or are relevant or whatever else. I wouldn't want to arrive at the next meeting when a report might have been written and find that my suggestions have been either completely ignored or brushed through. So I'm just asking for a bit more communication relevant to the meeting.
I'll just quickly follow up there, Councillor Cottier. I absolutely agree, Councillor Baxter. I did see your suggestions. I know that they are in the mix, and I can assure you that they will not be ignored.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Linda Wooden.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask a question. I'm quite interested in members talking about rewilding, and I understand it's been suggested it will be in all of our 4 towns in Skdc, and Queen Elizabeth Park in Grantham, I understand this is something that's taking place at the moment. Can somebody confirm that for me, please? Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, this is an item. This is an item.
This is an item that's actually item number 8. I was going to suggest we actually wait till that point, and maybe your answer will be answered then.
Councillor Wotton specifically asked about Queen Elizabeth Park. I think probably what you're referring to, Councillor Wotton, is the Blue-Green Corridor project, which is a combined effort between Skdc and NKDC and the Environment Agency, and that's possibly what you're experiencing in QE Park right now, and through into Wymondham as well. In fact, there is an item on the agenda which covers the other 3 towns.
That's great. Thank you for that. Thank you very much, and thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, will the item on the agenda concerning rewilding include indicative costs of planting and maintaining hedges?
We'll find out when we get there, Ashley.
Okay, because it was requested at the last meeting. And also on page 9 at the bottom, the second last bullet point, officers were going to investigate whether the conduit in Conduit Street is council owned. Was that confirmed or otherwise?
Gary, is Anne-Marie on the call? I think she did look at this, didn't she?
Anne-Marie is on the call. I'm not sure if Anne-Marie did look at it, but it certainly was followed up, as all the other actions. I understood that they'd been circulated to the members. Obviously, they haven't. The answer at the time given was that...
Sorry, Gary. It was Chris Pike that I think followed it up.
That's right, yeah.
I've got a recollection that somebody contacted me about it.
That's right. So the answer that was shared was that the conduit no longer functions, this bit you know, as a water fountain and is a scheduled ancient monument. It is not owned by SKDC. It is unlikely that, even if restored, it would meet modern standards of water hygiene due to the original pipe work. That was the feedback we had, and I thought was shared with the committee, but it's available for circulation.
It may have been shared with the committee, but for the record, for anyone trying to follow what's happening via copies of the Environment Scrutiny Committee agenda, they don't get all the emails that we get. So I just wanted to confirm, you're saying that we don't own the conduit?
That's the information I've been given, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, shall we move on to item 6?
Chairman, I've got a question for you.
Sorry. Okay, Ray.
Thank you very much, Steve, Chairman. It's regarding the action point on idling for taxis. Can you tell me, have officers had enough time to investigate whether we're going to impose any restrictions on taxis idling whilst they're standing still?
Can I just say that question forms part of, in fact, part of agenda item 6, Councillor Wotton. So you should get all of the information that you need from that.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6. Review of the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing Policy.
Would you like me to crack on, John? Thank you. Yeah. So as we all know, this came to committee last time, and at that point it was described the long and arduous path that this particular piece of policy will take in order to get to its final destination. The original meeting last time, we discussed the feedback from the workshop with regards to the review of the Hackney Carriage Private Licensing policy, and Anne-Marie and her team have taken on board all of that information and have incorporated that into the to the review, which will then allow us to go to consultation. So if you take on board your report, the recommendations are that we consider the draft Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing Policy and agree it with or without amendments as a basis for consultation. So the point that we're at now is we've taken on board all of the comments. They've been incorporated into the document, and we're asking the committee to say, yes, this is ready to go out to consultation. And then the second recommendation is that you recommend to myself, the Cabinet Member for Commercial and Operations, that the draft Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Policy is suitable for consultation. So there haven't been many changes between this and the last one, but we have done a lot of checking and incorporated into it the feedback that we got from the committee last time. So we've taken on board, for example, the examination requirements for for taxi drivers in terms of their language skills. We've taken on board the requirement for looking at whether or not vehicles can idle, and this particular item has been kept in line with the Road Traffic Vehicle Emissions Fixed Penalty England regulations, and drivers will be issued with a warning in the first instance, with any future idling resulting in SK penalty points. For councillors that are on the call and the members of the public who aren't aware, SK licensing has an SK penalty point system, whereby if licence holders are found to be in breach of the regulations or the requirements of our policies, they can be issued with penalty points. If they accrue more than 12 penalty points in 1 year, then they then have to stand in front of the committee, and the committee will decide whether or not they can be fit and proper persons to hold a licence. So that's one way. There are many things that you can be get your penalty points for, and incorporating the idling is, I think, one of the things that's in there. We also took on board the requirement for low emission vehicles and the reduced fees and charges, I believe. So that's all incorporated within the report. If Anne-Marie's on, have I missed anything? Conscious that this is, I've got lots of paper all around me, but perhaps you might want to just pop in and see if there's anything I've missed.
No, thank you, Councillor Mosley. I think you've covered everything there on the report.
Phew.
Okay, we'll go to questions. I believe Ray had a question originally, but asked before. We'll ask it again.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So if we are going to impose a penalty for idling, what would be the criteria for a vehicle, SKDC vehicle or taxi idling? Will it be idling too long, or idling with a passenger, or idling with windows open? What's the actual criteria?
Paragraph 2.13, Your Honour.
Right, thank you.
On page 32.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. It just proves that the necessity to read all the papers, because I've only just got this paper this morning, so I had to look at that. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, I was just trying to pitch in that it was this is a proposal for consultation as well, Councillor Wootton. So it's not policy yet.
Right.
So it will go out and people can input in what they think of that particular thing, and of course that will then help us craft the final final policy to come to committee.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I think it was recognised at the the last time we looked at this that it is a difficult thing to enforce, but that we should have something in there so that a persistent offender who just sits on the rank when they haven't got a passenger in the car, just waiting or just keeping warm, and just has the engine ticking over, is not acceptable, and that they should be warned. And if they do it again, then we will bring them or issue the penalty points, as Councillor Dr. Mosley said. So it is a statement of intent, really.
Yeah, I think it forms a much wider brief as well. That it states our ambition to lead in terms of climate objectives. We know that the St Peter's Hill Rack, for example, is in an air quality management zone, and in fact, those the measurements from that area are affected by continuous idling, especially in the winter. And it has been mentioned before. But it is a sensitive and a sensitive subject, and it needs to be dealt with in some degree of pragmatism, really.
Okay, I think we've covered that one. Ashley Baxter, Councillor Ashley Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. It's a little bit funny that this taxi licensing policy takes such a circuitous route. Instead of going directly from one place to another, it's got to go around all these different houses, like a bad taxi. I've read it, and the only thing that irks me is the capitalisation of Hackney Carriage. Either Hackney's got a capital letter or it hasn't. Can we please be consistent throughout the documents and the reports that Hackney is either a place with a capital letter or a description that may not, but one or the other, please. And aside from that, I'd quite happily propose the recommendations as set out in page 13.
Could I just say I'm delighted that the only thing that irks Councillor Baxter is a capital letter. Thank you for that, Councillor Baxter.
It's got to be a first.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley Baxter. We've had a proposer. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Great. Does anybody object to this going forward? That's carried then. We'll see it again in a couple of months' time. Okay, we move on to item 7. And we pass it back to you again, Councillor.
Yes, just finding the place in my notes here, Councillor Cotier. I seem to have missed out a page somewhere. So item 7 is climate task and finish. Yes, there we go. So this is just a verbal update, really. There have been no papers issued on this. There is a current confidential report from the Carbon Trust with regards to our carbon footprint, and I know a lot of members have taken part in the task and finish group there. And this is to update the committee that we've had a virtual task and finish group a couple of weeks ago. A very good conversation was had, I believe, with all of the members present, and the Carbon Trust presented to us the task ahead, I think is an important way to put it. The fact is that we have a carbon footprint of 7,600 tonnes of carbon per year to effectively deal with. Now, we are being bold as a council in that we are including what we call some of our Scope 3 downstream emissions within that. Some things that some organisations choose not to include, but as we are the owners of our leisure facilities, and it's the leisure facilities that contribute pretty much exclusively to those downstream Scope 3 emissions, we've taken it on board to include those and take responsibility for them. And I'm hoping that that leads by example with regards to what our ambitions are as a council. We have a number of challenges ahead, and there were a number of comments and points made at the meeting with regards to certain areas. I'll allude to some of them now. There was quite a good discussion around the influence of planning and climate, and it was made specifically clear that actually there is a limited gift with regards to our council as to what we can physically do with planning policy because it is set nationally, but that there was a genuine desire for us to try and influence as much as we could, and I think that's right. There were various other things that we talked about. We talked about our vehicle emissions, but also the subject that I think is top of the list there is what it's going to look like, what our council is going to look like after COVID, and that in itself will possibly have quite an impact on the baseline study that we've had done. And so we do need to be aware of that, and it may well be that we're staring right at a huge opportunity that we shouldn't miss, and that again was brought out. And our next stages with regards to that are to take that report and then start to put together plans for implementing some of the reductions that we can do. We're being a little cautious because we're not sure at the moment with regards to some of them what the world is going to look like in terms of what we need to do as a council, but nevertheless we'll do our best to bring that forward, and I think this will form part of the conversation that we have with the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee and its members moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Yes, please.
Ashley.
Thank you. First point, it was a really useful meeting, a really useful climate change action group to see what the Carbon Trust had prepared. I think the brief of the Carbon Trust was mainly to look at the council's own emissions, and so wider impact of South Kesteven as a district and as residents is a lot more work and a bit further down the road. The Carbon Trust report, why is it confidential, and when will it stop being confidential? And I mean, it seems daft.
Sorry, I've said it's confidential because we haven't published it in a public meeting yet, Ashley. That's why. And I think that we would want to put it into some context to deliver it to the public, because otherwise it could be misinterpreted. And that's the only reason. There's nothing underhand or hidden there. It's just that the Task and Finish group is a councillor workshop meeting. It's a private meeting, and we haven't published it publicly yet, but I'm sure we will do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would have made sense to attach it, minus anything that needs to be redacted, to a report to this committee, but maybe that's the plan for next month. But since the report is already finished and complete and has been discussed by the Climate Task and Finish group, I can see no reason why it shouldn't be published now. I wonder if it would be available under a Freedom of Information request. I suspect it would. So my next question was, when will it not be confidential? And then my next question is, how do we intend to deal with the wider impact of SKDC residents? So we've looked at our own house. We're looking at getting our own house in order, which is great. But when do we move on to the bigger issues like planning and waste and commercial waste and things that are not within our control, but certainly places where we can show community leadership?
Well, for just to address the issue, I'm sure that at some point we will put it into a format where it will be available to the public. Ashley, I'm not quite sure when it will be. I just, I don't want to preempt anything. I know that you're keen to do whatever it is you do, and so we'll try not to hold that up. In terms of our wider leadership role, this should be something that we're doing right now anyway. And I do believe that if you look at a lot of the messaging, certainly that I put out, it's very much leading in terms of reduce and reuse and recycle with regards to waste. And I think that we do need to be very wary of what we can try and insist people do, because we can't. We can put a message out that's positive and leads. But we can't force people to do a lot of this thing. And in terms of putting out things like, our food waste collection, for example, is incredibly good for the environment because it reduces your residual waste stream. It cleans up your recyclate stream. It's very good for the environment. And I'm hoping to be very proactive and try and get that out across the district as soon as we can. But of course, there's limits there. But we can't force people to put their food waste in the caddy at the end of the day. We can only encourage them to. So there is a limit to what our impact may well be. But we should, as councillors, be talking about these issues right now, and we shouldn't need a climate impact report to do that.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think we don't talk enough about the things that we can do. With regard to waste, I think part of the issue is the county council. And I know it frustrates. I understand it frustrates you, Councillor Mosley, that it's so difficult to get the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership to produce a consensus on what we tell our residents, even to a consensus around what we put in our recycling bins, or what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and what we can take to household waste centres. I certainly think that the difficulty between the Waste Collection Authority, the district, and the Waste Disposal Authority, the county, is part of the problem, because as you've said several times, Councillor Mosley, we pay all the costs and they take all the credit.
Can I just clarify that? I think that is true in terms of food waste, in that food waste collection is vastly expensive, but all of the benefits are recovered at disposal. But that is not the case with our standard residual or recyclate stream, in that we have a collection cost, but the disposal costs are just as large. So there is a partnership to be worked at here. I take on board your frustrations, Councillor Baxter. I do share them. We are working towards a consistent waste set of waste collection streams. That's taking time. It's taking too long. I obviously stand up for South Kesteven District Council with regards to what we want to see in terms of the waste. I believe we have a very strong voice on that partnership through that, but it is difficult to get what we want. It is also quite difficult to get the education that we need. Years ago, we used to have something called recycling credits, where we did the recycling, and we negotiated the recycler contract and got paid for doing that. And with the surplus from that, we invested in education and promotion and the like, and consequently we had very low contamination and very high recycling rates. And of course that situation disappeared 2 or 3 years ago. And it's not the case now. In order to get a message across to our residents, we now have to do it through the partnership, because there's no money elsewhere, and the benefit comes at disposal in terms of doing these things. So when you put out a message about reducing, or about what can go in and what can't go in, it then has a very short lifespan in terms of increasing the performance of the waste system, and all of that benefit is recovered by the county council, who should really be funding that, that messaging. And whilst they do it, I don't believe they do enough of it. And I'm certainly one of the councillors at the Waste Partnership meetings that is consistent in requesting that. So I'll continue to do that, but we'll also seek to look at, how we can work slightly differently, perhaps to do a better job.
As well as actually, this is just an update from the task and finishing group, and I'm sure there will be recommendations coming from them in due course when they've actually completed their task.
Well, I don't know how long that takes. I think it would be useful for us as a statutory, or I don't know if statutory is the right word, committee, to give them some sort of deadline. I mean, there's a lot of us here who are on both groups, and we attend both sets of meetings, but at the moment it's a task and maybe sometime never group. If it's a task and finish group, then we should be saying, subject to pandemics, etc., of course, but we should be saying this is a task and finish group, and finish is September.
Yeah, I take on board your point, Councillor Baxter. It's a task and finish group, yes. We do have some targets because we stated them when we declared a climate emergency, if you remember. So we have got those. I don't really think it's the operation and culmination of the task and finish group is not, I believe, within the remit of the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I think that actually that task and finish group provides a valuable mechanism to get all councillors involved, and not just those on the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So I think it's good that, yes, it should get on, and I do believe we are getting on. At some point it will finish. I think it will become fairly evident once we start getting into putting tasks together when that time will be.
I still request, Chair, that we ask for at least an interim report at our next meeting. Because I understand the issues of pandemics and officers and all that, but I think that it's reasonable for the Environment Committee to ask the Climate Change Task and Finish Group for some public report of progress, because otherwise we have a meeting behind closed doors, and I won't go into the ums and ahs of that, but we have a meeting behind closed doors for some councillors, and then we have a verbal update at a meeting, and it's very difficult for members of the public to pin anything down to say what are we actually doing. So I recommend, I don't know how to do this, but I would like a recommendation from this committee that we have a progress report from the Climate Change Task and Finish Group at our next committee meeting.
Actually, we do get progress records. We're getting verbal ones, but we do get recommendations which we are pushing forward through to Cabinet.
No, we have not put anything through to Cabinet since about September.
Can I just interject again? I think again, I understand Ashley and where he's coming from on here. I think actually the difficulty is that at this stage we haven't put through a proposal to do something yet, because we've been working on, well, where are we starting to measure, and what's our measurement, and then what do we move on from there. We literally got the report back, I think, 2 weeks ago, and I think we had a task and finish group within a few days of that, and I'm verbally updating you now, but as I said, our next task is to go away and formulate proposals for things that we can actually do to reduce our carbon footprint, and that's of course then when they get presented to this committee. So I think it's just a little bit of lag that we're seeing now, to be fair. At the end of the day, if the Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee want to request a written report from the Task and Finish group, then they're perfectly at liberty to do so, and a report will be provided. Whether that will be beneficial, and in terms of the fact that there are going to be things coming down the road anyway, is perhaps to be debated. But I'll leave that one with you anyway.
So Chairman, in light of the fact that it is a climate emergency and we should be showing the public that we are taking this seriously, I would like to request, and I don't mind if it doesn't find a seconder, but I would like to request a written report from the Climate Change Task and Finish Group at the next meeting of Environment OSC.
Okay, we've had a request of your seconder.
Well, Chairman, I indicate to speak following.
I'm not to you yet. I do apologise, but
no problem. Do you want me to speak now?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I am happy to second Councillor Baxter's motion, and I think it would be helpful to the council to do that. I really do, because, and I pay tribute. Look at the.
I didn't know you played the piano, Phil.
It wasn't me. As Ashley and Peter have said, the Task and Finish group that we had the other day was very encouraging, and I thought it was very, very good. There was actually one comment. It wasn't Councillor Baxter. Somebody saying, "Oh, we're not taking climate change seriously." I think we are. I said it at the time, and I think we are. And I really welcome where we've got to. And, things do take a long time, but it's less than a year since we agreed to the climate change emergency as a council. I share the frustrations, I really do. As Councillor Moses said, it's 7,600 tonnes a year that we as a council of carbon that we're chucking into the atmosphere. I can't remember, Peter, if you've got the figure to hand. I bet you have, knowing you, as to what the overall figure was for the, not just what the council's doing, but what industry and everybody else is, and houses, what we're all doing across the rest of South Kesteven. What the council is doing is minuscule compared to that figure. And what I hope that we are doing as a council is putting our own house in order, showing what can be done, and then at a valid point going out to the public and saying, look, this is what we've done. What are you doing about it? It's a much bigger problem than just this council. So I do share the frustrations, I've got to say. I don't think it would be any harm, and this is probably the right time at our next meeting to get a written report, because if we look at the work programme for today, on agenda item 9, right at the back of the agenda papers, so page 111, it says what we're going to do today, and we're going to get a verbal update from Councillor Mosley, which we've had, and it says outcome sought. And it says of the outcome sought, to consider any recommendations from the Task and Finish group as appropriate, and where necessary make recommendations to Cabinet. I just think we should push it, and let's see if at the next meeting we can at least get a report, hopefully with some recommendations in it. I think we are, the Carbon Trust has come to us with what you might call a roadmap for the way ahead. I think we're all cross-party right behind it, and I think a written report would be helpful. And maybe that's the time to actually go out, with the communications team to actually publicise what we're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dilks, and it's interesting that you bring to the fore there that the recommendations from the Task and Finish, and I think I alluded earlier to the fact that I think that these recommendations are going to form actually tasks that we actually need to do in terms of projects that we can fulfil to reduce our emissions, and I think that they will be forthcoming. It's just we only had the Task and Finish group a couple of weeks ago, and we've got to then put together an awful lot of stuff if we want to look at all of these things that we're going to do, or that we want to do, in order to reduce our emissions, are going to cost money. There is absolutely no way around that, and the money needs to be found somewhere. And of course, we're literally just coming into a recovery phase of a global pandemic across the world and in this country, and we've had a very difficult time in the last 3 months, and it's been very costly as well. So we do have to be a little bit pragmatic about that, but we're going to do what we can to make sure we can bring something that's going to have a meaningful impact on our carbon in terms of projects. But it's going to take us a little while to get that together, because there are a lot of things to to get right in that. And of course, like I say, budgets notwithstanding in terms of that too. I do not have the figure of the whole of the carbon impact of South Kesteven. I would suspect Ashley's probably got it, but we know what we need to do. I will point out that 41.5% of that 7,600 is downstream Scope 3 leased buildings emissions, so leisure centres basically. So we've taken on almost our own footprint again, when we didn't technically have to, but I think it's absolutely the right thing that we have. We've certainly made a big challenge for ourselves, and I'm sure we can put something together for the next meeting. The next meeting of this committee is only in a month's time, I think. Yeah, they're quite close together, these two, but I'm sure we can put something together. But I'd want the officers to focus on some of the specific projects that are actually going to deliver, more than a basic report that you could get verbally, to be fair. But I'm happy for it to be in writing.
But Peter, if I can briefly come back, thank you for that. Our next meeting, I think I'm right, I can't remember what month we adopted the climate change emergency plan, but I'm pretty sure it'll be a year, won't it? And that's a good opportunity to say, look, we've spent the year looking at X, Y, and Z. Here's one thing we know we're going to do, but we're also looking at X, Y, and Z as possibilities. And I think that would be welcomed in the public domain, particularly if we could have a look at that the Carbon Trust report and see what we can make public within that. There may be things in there that we don't want to. I appreciate that, but if we could at least go with that Carbon Trust report, which is very impressive, as a document, and I think we'd achieve something there. Otherwise, there's a danger of it just going on, and it'll be 2 years before we go back and say, oh, we're going to do X or Y. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Councillor Dilks, and I want there to be some progress made. There will be some progress made. We're at the very beginning of that. Well, we're not quite at the beginning now, because we've done one of the most important tasks straight out of the way at work, which is to work out how big the task is. So we've actually, accomplished that. even though, you know, the curveball of the global pandemic has somewhat probably skewed it a little bit, and we do need to be mindful of that. I think in terms of what we've achieved with all of the constraints and the issues that as a council we've had to cope with in the last few months, I think we've got to a good place, but we can't sit back and be idle about this, and I don't believe we are sitting back and being idle. But we do need to come now and say, right, okay, this is what we can do. So the point's landed, and I'm sure we can do something with that.
Thank you.
Okay, we've had a proposal for a report for the next meeting from Ashley Baxter, seconded by Phil Dilks. All those in favour?
Yes.
I think you might need to go and call a register, John.
I was going to do that. Jack, can we do a register, please?
No problem. Can you just Councillor Cottier?
4.
Councillor Baxter?
4.
Councillor Dilks?
4.
Councillor Johnson?
4.
Councillor Smith?
4.
Councillor Ray Wootton?
4.
And Councillor Linda Wootton?
4.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll leave that with you, Peter. And
no problem. Just for information, John, a year I'm told will be in September. So we declared a climate emergency in September last year, I believe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, which I believe again is with you, Peter.
It is indeed, yes. And I'm struggling to find again the thing in my paper pack. So I do have a presentation now, I think we've got with that one. The rewilding issue, obviously we've touched on this with members earlier. There is an ambition, I believe, from the committee to look at how we can rewild and be more biodiverse within our district. This forms one aspect of that. There were some ideas that were brought back to the council last time to this committee that we had a very, very good discussion on and took on some very interesting ideas, and they needed to be firmed up, and I believe Councillor Dilks alluded to consultation with other bodies and the like, and we have managed to follow that up. I think we've got a presentation to put on the screen. Who's going to pop that one up? Is that Gary?
I'm just trying to do it now, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can anybody see it? If you can let me know when it comes on the screen, please.
It's a load now, I think, Gary. Still saying loading.
Zena, does it normally take this long to load up?
Yeah, it often does.
As I've not actually been in a virtual meeting yet where we've had a shared presentation, so I'm not sure. Here we are.
We have them in planning, and they do take a few minutes.
Okay, that's up there now, isn't it? So you're going to control this, Gary, are you?
Yep, you tell me when you want to move to different slides.
Okay, all right. Well, just to introduce, so we've taken on board the request from committee and gone and looked at some specific plans with specific costs, and engaged with the local members and groups accordingly. So if we move on to the next slide, Gary. Yeah, so we sent consultation packs to Skdc ward councillors. and requested feedback, which closed about a week and a half ago. In the context of this, rewilding is allowing nature to take back control, so it's basically leaving areas to do their own thing. There could be some form of management with regards to that as well. So tiered land management would be a method of providing multiple bands or tiers within the same area, which can allow different levels of rewilding. So that can give you, depending on the area, can give you a different perspective on it. And we looked at 3 specific areas. Excuse me. The first one was Tassel Drive in Market Deeping, and I think members will all be aware that we have actually done some work there in the past. Tassel Drive was the subject of a traveller encampment about 3 years ago. They were evicted, and subsequent to that we put in a bund and rewilded, sowed a wildflower mix on the bund, and that's provided a natural barrier and a very pretty place locally now that it's established. We're also looking at the Recreation Road play area in Bourne and the Foxclock play area in Stamford. And again, in relation to, if it comes out in this project, Councillor Wotton's, Linda Wotton's comments about QE Park, that this has already been actioned as part of the Blue-Green Corridor project. Could we move on, Gary? So, the Tassel Drive, there's a plan shown in the appendices, and I don't think we can go, we're going to get there, I think, throughout this, so we're going to probably draft through these relatively quickly. But if there's member support for the trial rewilding project, then you recommend that this proceeds to me, and we'll see, we'll get that moving. The Recreation Road Bourne, again, plan in the appendices. It says here members do not support proposal, and I'm guessing that's with regards to the feedback we've had from consultation. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes, the bullets here are giving the headline summary of the feedback we've received. So these are then what's proposed in terms of those recommendations.
Yeah, so of course, if members do not support that proposal, then there's obviously recommended not to proceed. And of course, that doesn't close the options book for the future. We can look at other areas and other plans and the like. But it is important that we have local member support, I believe, on these. And then finally, Foxworth Road, Rutland Heights play area. Again, the plan will be in there, and there is support locally from the members with regards to that. If we could move on, Gary. Thank you. Okay, so we've just got a few little additional, financial summaries. I mean, we're not talking huge amounts of money here. There are some costs associated. I think they're estimated, aren't they, Gary? Because there will be an impact if we say we don't want to cut a certain amount of grass somewhere. The bottom line is you still have to cut the grass, the other bits of grass, and you still have to transport the equipment and machinery and people to that place, even though you're not doing, a few extra square meters of it. So that pretty much gives you an indication of savings are negative, I believe, Gary, aren't they? Yeah.
Yes, there's a small, as you say, they're estimated.
Yeah, small savings in a couple of, and a small indicative one-off costs on others. All within something that's reasonable. Can we move on?
That's it, Peter. Then it's the appendices.
That's it. We've got the appendices to pop in, and are they on these slides? So we can just have a quick look.
If you want to go through those.
Yeah, I think it would be useful because we've got some substitute members on the committee, and they may not have been aware of what we're talking about here. So this is Tassel Drive, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So I don't think. Let me just get my.
What you've got here, Peter, for each of them is a summary of sort of what was proposed, a few pictures, and then it goes, which was all the detail in the consultation, and then it gives a summary of the feedback that was received.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It was the Tassel Drive. I wanted to try and point out where the bund was, and I kind of so if you the areas that are shown on there, the bund that we'd put in is actually to the right of that green pass. Tassel Drive isn't actually specified on that map, but it's the road to the right. and then there's a bund, a wildflower bund down on that side, so it already has a degree of rewilding, and you'll see from the overhead that it's got some there are some sort of trees in there and the like, so it's quite a nice area, and it kind of lends itself to that particular management. Do you want to cover the comments that we had from councillors on that?
Yep. Basically, it was there was no objections and just positive support as listed there from Councillor Baxter.
Okay, well, we probably ought to then go quickly onto the Bourne one that there was objection to, just so that we can all understand what that is. So, Recreation Road is an area round at the back of the waterworks and towards the Bourne Abbey area of Bourne. And it's traditionally an area where there's a lot of recreation and sports, football, etc. on Saturday mornings with local youth teams and the like. And I believe there's a play area down to the south side of that. So that's there was an area down the one side which was proposed for rewilding, and I think there was objection to that, wasn't there?
Yep. So it's just another view of the same. This was the information that went out in the pack, but there was it wasn't about the principle of it, as I understand. And Lynn, feel free to jump in because you were the one who had the direct discussions. But and of course, members of the committee, Councillor Smith, also able to comment. But yeah, it was after discussions around the recreation ground. There was feeling from local residents and others that it wouldn't suit the purposes of the site that it's used for, as listed there.
I think it's an interesting thing, this, in that it's important to recognise that this kind of intervention is not suitable everywhere. It's to be used where it's appropriate, and I do know that the recreation ground area is very, very heavily used, and I can understand why Councillor Knowles and Councillor Smith do consider it's not the best of places, and that maybe we should look elsewhere and see if we can, and I'm sure we will do that. Do you want to move on to the next one, Gary? Okay, so this is Foxworth Road, an area I'm not particularly familiar with, but we're looking at a small amount of rewilding at that particular play area. There's still a good area of recreation ground to be still used. There's a sports court on there as well, which isn't impacted by it.
So on the left here, you had the original proposal, and on the right is the revised proposal.
Yes,
feedback.
Yeah,
and the feedback mostly related to some play equipment that was planned for the site. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So that actually fits in quite well there. Do you want to move on, Gary? Yeah.
So this is another presentation of what was on the right-hand side of the previous slide. The yellow line and the sort of squiggly line indicate the areas as was shown for rewilding, and the blue rectangles indicate the approximate position of the new play equipment that's being proposed and worked on.
Yeah, so that in itself, it puts a picture together of quite a nice area that will be, with new play equipment and rewilded areas, very nice environment, I believe, and of course that's supported locally as well. Do you want to move on? So
that's just the feedback, the summary of the feedback that we had.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, it's one of those things with this. We will be wanting to keep in touch with local residents to see what they feel of the changes that have been made, because it's important that we get that feedback and it influences our future work as well. It's an aspect of the environment that is good for some, and some, so some people like the idea, some people not so much. And it's important that we get the balance right, and I think this allows us to do something, and then to look at the impact that it's had and the feedback that we've got, and give us a good steer moving forwards. Is there another slide there?
No, that's the final slide. So I'll go back to the recommendations.
So basically, yeah. So if we go back to the recommendations, I'll leave that open to the committee to debate, and we're happy to field questions. Thank you.
Okay, the first one I've got asking for speakers, Phil.
Thank you. Well, you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to ask you, why has Deep in St James been airbrushed out of this scheme? At the last meeting, we were given a very similar presentation. I believe it was actually in the agenda pack before the meeting. And I'm first of all, I'm annoyed, and I want to ask why. Here we are again with another verbal report from the cabinet member. We were told actually it was going to be from the officer, from Lynn Lord, but it's another verbal report. Why on earth could we not have had this report some time ago to at least prepared for the meeting? There's no reason these, when were these slides finished? You're not telling me it was yesterday or the day before.
It was 15th of June, Phil.
Well, that's a week ago, for goodness sake. I've got to say, it's just not good enough. And we should be complaining to whoever, whether it's Gary or Lynn or whoever it is. It's just not good enough. Yes, we've got a pandemic, but let's not use that for an excuse for everything. Now, that's my first question. When I saw the first slide, I thought ward councillors consulted. Oh, they've gone to Market Deeping. Well, it wasn't Market Deeping and West Deeping that was originally in the suggested for the example in the Deepings. It was Jubilee Park in Deeping St James. And now I know, as I alluded to earlier, that when I came back, I put that on Facebook, and I welcomed it. I welcomed the idea that had been put forward, and I said it's just an idea that's being put forward. There is going to be consultation, and I got my ears chewed off by another councillor who basically said online that it was going to be over my dead body or over her dead body, and she also said she wouldn't be dictated to by a bunch of Grantham pen pushers, and she was talking about our officers. Now I've got to say those comments were outrageous, and it seems to me that one councillor has been able to just kibosh the idea for Deep in St James because one person didn't like it. I have to say, on the Facebook notification that I put on about this, most people welcomed the idea. They thought it was a great idea for Jubilee Park in Deep in St James, which we had the similar drawings for at the last meeting. It was going to happen. There were problems in the particular area of the Jubilee Park, that perhaps it wasn't the best area within the park, but there was, even from the member who went off on one and kicked off on it, there was acceptance and welcome that in another part of Jubilee Park it might be a good idea. So where is Deep in St James gone? What's the problem? I've got some more questions. I'd like to deal with that first, Chairman, but I'd like to talk about rewilding in a more general sense once we've dealt with that. Thank you.
Peter?
I don't know where Jubilee Park has gone, but I do remember saying that we seem to have two projects for Market Deeping and one for the other towns, and that we were to do one for each town. So maybe they chose one, and that would have been it.
Peter, who chose? Look,
would you like me to answer the question, Councillor Dilks, or would you like to have this as an opportunity to just bash other councillors? I think it's incredibly unprofessional of you to be talking so disingenuously about another councillor who is not here to speak up for themselves. I am quite happy to answer the questions. Thank you.
In my defence, I've got to say it's not disingenuous because it was made public. Those remarks were made public, and they never should have been. It's not me that's being disingenuous. I was very angry about it. And if we'd come... What I'm saying is, we had a meeting...
Can we ask Peter to answer the question first, and before we actually go off on on a sidetrack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We had a meeting,
Look,
and we decided that we were going to
answer the question for you. So let's answer the question, and then we'll take it from there.
So my understanding is that we chose one for each town. There were two for Market Deeping, and the one that was chosen was Tassel Drive. I don't know what criteria was specified. I wasn't party to any discussions between the two, but these are the ones that have come forward. There is a rewilding proposal for Market Deeping. There is a rewilding proposal for Bourne. There is a rewilding proposal for Stamford, and there is already a proposal underway as part of the Blue Green project in Grantham.
Peter, is there any chance of actually looking into a possible rewilding at the?
I'm sure we can find we can ask the officers to find out why they chose Tassel Drive above Jubilee Park, and let the committee know. I'm not part of that. I mean, I'm happy that there is one for each town, and I think it's good that there's one for each town, and I'm glad that the one in Market Deeping is supported. And we'll obviously look at an alternative to see if we can get something into Bourne. And again, I'm pleased that Stamford and Grantham are also included.
Okay. Philip, I believe you have another question for something else other than what was just being discussed.
Yeah, I do. Clearly, I support the idea of rewilding areas, and I do welcome it. On a slightly wider point, on the weekend I was asked by two different people, two different subjects, but they are both on rewilding, and I would like to sort of ask Peter to sort of take up these points. One was a gentleman pointing out that in Frognall, which is a part of Deeping St James, in my ward, residents have, over the past 20 years, he tells me, maintained a verge outside, I think it's outside his house, but certainly within Frognall, by the phone box in Frognall, I'm told. And he said, despite it being eroded by traffic over the years, they've done their best to sort of maintain it and plant or have some wildflowers growing in it. Unfortunately, at the beginning of June, it was cut, and he says it's now bald, and they cut all the wild flowers, and so he's pretty angry with that. And I've looked into it, and it is, I believe it's a verge that's cut by Environment SK. That's the first one. I'll raise the second one, Peter, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I may. The second one was concerning not rewilding, but the wildflowers that were growing on a central reservation of the dual carriageway around the Deepings. And this gentleman, he's well known in the village as a naturalist, and he complained to SK Highways that the at the beginning of June, the central reservation was just sort of cut and all the wildflowers went. Well, of course, it wasn't SK, it was Lincolnshire Highways. He eventually got to them and he asked them, why does the vegetation have to be cut at peak season, in the flowering season, when the bees and the insects are at their busiest, etc. Now, he got a reply back from the county, which concerns me. And the reply said, and I quote, it said, the central reservation is cut twice a year, once at the start of the season and then again at the end. I've got to say, I'm not sure where the beginning of June comes into either the beginning or the end. But it says this is done because there is a filter drain running down the middle of this central reservation. And then the reply says, we asked South Kesteven District Council if they wanted to attend during lane closures to pick litter, but they declined. And then it goes on to talk about having, say, they don't have a record of any planting license for wildflowers. I didn't know you needed a license. I don't know if Peter can elude us on that.
Yeah.
But I'm particularly, I would like to sort of follow up on this, Environment SK. Are they aware on the first one, this Frognall one, are they sensitive to wildflowers and wilding, on grass verges? I know it's difficult, but, what's the sort of policy on it? And secondly, this thing about, SK not being interested in going and litter pick. I know it's crazy. What hits you is, why, two different authorities, one cuts the grass and the other follows behind doing litter picking, is crazy in all our minds, I'm sure. But if Peter could just sort of give us a clue and take those up, I'd be most grateful. Thank you.
Right, I'll follow up first. Okay, verge cut by ESK. Right, the thing that everybody needs to remember about ESK is that they are a commercial company and they will do what they're employed to do. So if somebody's employed them to cut a piece of grass that they own, then they'll go out and cut that. So actually, we need to be not looking at what ESK have done and saying ESK did this. They might well have done, but they will have been paid to do it by somebody else. And we need to be finding out who paid them to do it. And that will be down to, it could be a town or parish council, it could be SKDC, it could be LCC, it could be a private landowner. So I'll ask Gary to just dig a little bit down into that and find out who raised the work order, whether it came from us, and we'll certainly find out from the SK who asked them and paid for that piece of work to be done.
Be the parish council, Peter, Deacon St James Parish Council.
What? So they own it. Well, in which case, if it was on a work order,
I think the parish council has got a contract with ESK to cut those particular verges. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, if they've got a contract with ESK to cut the particular verges, then it shouldn't be a galloping shock when they go along and do it. So that's the thing. ESK are a contractor in the same way that Ground Control, Glendale, whoever else are. And if they've got a work order to do something from somebody who owns the land and there's an agreement in place, that's what they'll go and do. That would be from that point of view. In terms of the... Sorry?
I'm sorry, Peter. Gary here. Just in terms of follow-up from me, because you've asked me to follow up. I mean, all I can do is relay that it's been raised by a member of the committee and forward that on to Deacon St James Parish Council. It's an item for them, obviously.
Sorry, I think now that Councillor Dilks has said it's the responsibility of the parish council, then there is nothing for you to do, Gary.
Thank you.
But actually, what I will do is, as the chairman of the board of directors, I'll just have a little bit of a dig at ESK and just check that the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And if you don't mind, Councillor Dilks, I'll get back to you directly with that.
Thank you.
And the second point would be the central reservations and the like, and it was a lovely story. In terms of the litter picking, when we first started to do the big clean, the SKDC went to LCC and asked them if they could notify us when they were doing lane closures, because lane closures on highways cost an inordinate amount of money. And they promised that they would liaise with us. I do not believe that they have liaised with us once since then when they've had lane closures. And SKDC would be happy to go out and send teams of litter pickers as long as it was appropriate to do so if lane closures were in place. And I don't believe our policy on that has ever changed. And finally, I do understand that, yes, you do have to have a licence to plant flowers in verges. We wanted to do it in Rippingale. We want to put daffodils down, and we had to pay for a licence from LCC. It's bonkers.
Thanks very much, Peter. Appreciate that.
You're welcome, Phil.
Okay. I believe Ashley had a question as well.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'm delighted that something appears to be happening. So it appears that we're possibly going to be making a recommendation. And so I don't take away from that at all. I appreciate the work the officers have done since the COVID thing has calmed down, and I'm grateful that anything is happening. As some of you know, I've been arguing for more wildlife conservation measures on Tattershall since before I was elected. So that must be about 2015 that I've been taking photographs and trying to get something to happen on that piece of land. And although I wouldn't want to repeat the Gypsy Traveller episode at all. The outcome of getting this bund is great. So that's the happy news. I'm really disappointed, as Councillor Dilks has said, that it has taken so long to get to this point. I don't understand why, after the last meeting, we agreed, and I think it might have been even during the last meeting, we agreed to consult stakeholders. And I went out the following day and put the market deepening proposals on Facebook, and I got some feedback. And I know that Councillor Dilks has already said that he went to Facebook and put the Deeping St James proposals, which led to this skirmish, I suppose, and I think some angry phone calls from other members.
I think this has already been covered. This question has already been answered. Peter has already answered that he will follow it up and find out what happened.
So, sorry, he will find out what happened to the lack of consultation on any of the schemes during February.
Well, he said he'll find out.
I don't think I've answered that one actually,
yes.
John.
I thought you were referring.
I answered why. I answered it. I said I'd find out why Deeping St James got cut from the proposals, but I didn't. Ashley's point is on consultation, I believe.
Yes, it is. Yes. So at the last meeting, which was in February, before the COVID pandemic took hold, there were 4 clear weeks that could have been used to do consultation with all stakeholders, as was agreed, and it didn't happen. It could have happened because, as Councillor Dilks and myself have shown, we did our own consultation and we certainly got some feedback. Phil got more feedback than he was hoping for, I think. But we've really missed a trick, and we've also wasted another opportunity because we haven't. We could have been doing some of this during the COVID outbreak, and we could have had some land grown. As you know, at Councillor Mosley's request, I had a chat with Councillor Mosley, and he suggested that I write a report proposals to give to the chair and the people concerned. So I did write a 5-page report illustrated with colour photographs and sent it to the chair and other members of the decision-making community, I suppose you'd call it. And I really hope that hasn't been a complete waste of my time, because based on the verbal report that we've been presented, not a lot seems to have been taken on board. I don't know if I'm allowed to.
Ashley, can I just clarify something with you? The last meeting was on 25th of February, and the lockdown measures started 2 weeks later.
No, they didn't. They started on the 23rd of March.
Some of them did. That's what I've got in here.
Before then, I think.
I think the emergency planning situation went somewhere before then, but I think that couldn't matter less in this respect. I take on board Councillor Baxter's view. Have you got any further ones before I speak, Ashley?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Crack on.
I'm becoming the active presenter, it says here. So I wrote this report. I then, after in about, I think, late May or June, I wrote to the chair of the committee, as was then, and was told that part of the reason the consultation hadn't happened was that hedges had been added in, as if that was some kind of problem. Some of you will remember that at the last committee meeting, I said, I'm not sure about a bund at Deeping St James. I think hedges might be better. This was used as an excuse by the previous chairman of the committee as to why the consultation hadn't happened. Can I refer members to page 11 of the pack? On page 11, in the action points from the last meeting, second bullet point, officers explained that they were asked by the committee to look at grass and rewilding. The costs of hedge planting could be investigated. So, have we investigated the cost of hedge planting? That can't be a very long phone call, surely. That's a phone call to Environment SK or someone similar and say, how much does it cost to plant 10 yards of hedge? So I'm really disappointed that we've only got a verbal report here and not a written report. And I'm really disappointed that we haven't asked the questions that were asked quite legitimately at the February meeting. And I'm really disappointed that we haven't got any feedback from the other stakeholders, including Friends of Jubilee Park, but also from the town councils. In your report, Gary or Peter, whose ever report it is, your PowerPoint, it says that the town councils were copied in. Can you confirm that the town councils have given you no feedback? And then going back to this report, that I don't know if you can you see the report that I've shared? Yes, you can. Can you see the report that I've tried to share?
Not anymore.
No.
No.
No, the black screen.
Okay, I beg your pardon. I don't know how to do that again. I'll share a window. You did have it, didn't you? Just one moment. Yeah.
Can we, Zena, are you still on the call, Zena?
I am, yes.
Yeah, can we just clarify whether it's appropriate for members to be sharing? I mean, I don't believe that this is part of the agenda pack or documentation for it. Is it appropriate for members to be sharing stuff that isn't within the agenda pack in a meeting?
It's not part of the agenda pack. It falls under the agenda item. It's at the chair's discretion, I believe, as to whether they would allow this information to be presented at the meeting.
Could we just clarify with the chair that it's acceptable just before?
Well, for clarity,
that's all.
I did ask for it to be shared. I did ask for it to be included within the agenda of the meeting, but my request was ignored by the previous chair. And I don't see there's anything libelous or harmful within it. I don't see that there's anything disgusting, other than I think probably my final point for now is the picture that you can see in front of you. You can see on the left-hand side a grassed area, and on the right-hand side the same area after the cut, which took place during. Oh, it's gone again. For some reason, SKDC, could be COVID related. SKDC decided to mow to within an inch of its life every piece of grassed area for miles around, when there was a real opportunity to let some of that grass grow, to let the hedgehogs survive, to let the insects, the birds, the nesting birds have a fair try at a environmental survival. And I think it was disgraceful that
I believe you're supposed to be asking a question. You're actually lecturing at everybody.
Yes, because I have tried communicating with the chair and the cabinet member for that matter.
Well, unfortunately, the previous chair is no longer with us. And I wasn't privy to those conversations, so I'm not exactly happy having pieces of information thrown at me now. If you've got a question for Peter, please ask it. If not, we'll move on.
Right. So question one, why isn't the cost of hedges included in this agenda?
Are there any hedges on the proposed plans?
No.
At the last meeting.
That would be why there aren't any in that particular thing. I can get Lynn to get the prices of the cost of hedging for us.
That's what you said last time. It says.
Is Lynn on the call, Gary?
Yes, I believe Lynn is on the call and can probably answer. Obviously, officers will prepare whatever is asked for. The minutes of the meeting refer to hedges being added to the work programme, and it basically says officers to assess the indicative cost of planting and maintaining hedges on council-owned land and update the committee at a future meeting to be added to the work programme. So when that's added to the work programme, we'll prepare an update for that. I'm sure Lynn can give feedback on specific bits in between times.
Yeah.
So why isn't it in the work plan?
Well, I don't control your work plan.
We do.
Well, I'm asking the chair, why isn't it in the work plan?
Because no one's asked for it. Even though I've asked for items to go into the work plan, no one's given me any, including yourself, Ashley. But we'll get to the work plan later, so we can add it then.
Okay. So my next question, why is there no feedback from the town councils? Have they not been consulted?
Gary, do you have information on that?
Yes, as Ashley highlighted, the town council clerks were all copied into the consultation, and members were asked to liaise with all local groups and town councils as part of that to collate any feedback. I understand there was some interaction from at least one of the town councils, but Lynn would be able to provide the details of that.
Gary, through the chair, may I ask, was the parish council in Deacon St James consulted on what we agreed to do at the last meeting regarding the Jubilee Park, or was it sort of kiboshed before that?
As Peter said, the recommendation of the committee, which is what officers have undertaken, was that one initiative per town was consulted on, so that's what has been done. I've noted that members of the committee would like to have greater clarification as to why the Tassel Drive one was consulted on rather than the Jubilee Park one, so happy to provide an answer to that.
Thank you.
I'd like to question what Gary Smith has just told us, Chair. The email that I had regarding the Tassel Drive rewilding certainly didn't have any request that I consult more widely. I assumed that when we were told by the officers at the last meeting that stakeholders would be consulted, that stakeholders would be consulted. And if I was supposed to consult the stakeholders myself, other than that which I did anyway through Facebook, then perhaps the email should have said that. Gary, you've said that it was our responsibility to contact the town councils. That wasn't in the original email.
Sorry, I was just trying to pull up the slides that were part of the pack for consultation pack, which the whole point of copying the town councils is so the clerks is so that they were aware and so that there was a chance for them to feed in proactively rather than wait for them to be asked. But the consultation. Sorry.
Have you had any response from the town councils?
Sorry, I was just going to say, and that the presentation slides described collating the feedback. But Lynn, are you able to give any detail in terms of what town council, if any, did feed into the discussions?
Oops. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
No, we had no feedback come from any of the parish town councils other than Stamford Town Council. And that was verbally as part of the consultation for Foxclock.
Thank you, Lynn. Through the chair, thank you, Lynn. That certainly wasn't reported within the presentation, so thank you for clarifying. I personally think the Stamford consultation shows that the consultation, once you get started on it, actually works, because we've clearly presented an idea to Stamford and they've said, we like it, but not quite like that, and we've come out with something better. That's how consultation is supposed to work. So, I guess finishing on a positive, I'm glad that Stamford have said not this, but that, and they want to work with us. And obviously, I'm pleased that Market Deeping want to work with us as well. But the cutting down of the grass all over the district, I assume, certainly all over the Deepings, in the middle of June was really counterproductive and a real wasted opportunity.
Can I just say something, Ashley?
Yes.
The council is damned if it does and it's damned if it doesn't. If it left it to grow and then cut it, you'd end up with grass all over the roads and all over people's fronts of the houses, and you'd get people complaining. There's a happy medium to be sought, but you can't leave it to grow and grow when it's at the roadside and in the middle between the path and the road, because that's what'll happen. I know what happens on my banking. They cut it 3 times a year, and the banking there, the grass grows and it's down in the street for weeks and weeks, even though they bring the blower down. So as I say, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Well, no,
where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask, and I welcome in.
We've got the speaker who wants to speak, so that's Councillor Linda Wooden.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to speak. Dr. Mosley mentioned about having a licence at LCC, and thought this is a good point for me to come in, because Lincolnshire County Council do have a policy on roundabouts which includes planting on verges, and anybody can apply, like a parish council, town council, to do their own thing, to do their own planting on verges. I believe a licence is involved, but I don't want to disagree with Dr. Mosley. I don't think there's a cost to that licence at the moment, but I could be wrong.
You may be right, Linda. I do know that you do have to apply for permission if you want to plant anything on a verge that isn't there anyway. And I think that was what, and I thank you for that point. Can I just weigh in on the grass cutting in parks as well? I think there's a wider point here, and it's worth mentioning that once the COVID situation and lockdown occurred, it became a priority for this council to ensure that our parks and gardens were as accessible as possible to everybody who would be perhaps locked up in their houses and only out once a day for a short period of time. And having those areas accessible so that people could wander around them was vitally important at that time, and it was one of the services that we managed to make sure that we maintained and did well. You know, it's not going to answer every question. I take on board Gloria's point in that we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, and to an extent she's right. I certainly felt that at that particular time I would much rather that people had somewhere where they could go that was clean, tidy, and that they could get their daily exercise at in a way that would help them. And I believe that as a council we did that.
Yeah, and if I may just go on, Chairman, and I do agree with what my colleagues have said about the grass cutting. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And most of the complaints I got last year were about lack of grass cutting. And that's it from me. Thank you. Other than that, I would point out in some areas and other counties, they do planting in between dual carriageways, which is all wildflowers. When I've been sort of out on various holidays, you know, and it is quite lovely to see, but I'm afraid a lot of our areas get a bit neglected. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, I know, Phil, you've already spoken before and you want to ask another question, but I have other people who haven't spoken yet, so I'm going to ask them first and come back to you if that's all right.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Judy Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. At last, I can speak. Thank you very much. I think that Peter and Gary have already explained about the recreation ground situation. It is heavily used by sports training, mainly junior footballers, but there's a lot of other groups use it as well. And then we do get a large, quite an amount of large charity events during the year, plus parents taking their kids down to play whenever they can. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, right. Sorry, I thought I could hear somebody else. And there's the play area as well, which is well used. But Councillor Knowles and myself were very much in favour of such an area, and there is a small play area off Northfields, which is in our ward, and I wondered if anything could be done there, just to make a rewilding area. Could we look into that, do you think?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. I think, as I alluded earlier, the recreation ground, it seemed, was, you know, whilst it was possible, it was perhaps not the best of places because of the usage and type of usage. And I think Councillor Smith puts an alternative to us that we could look into. And I think perhaps Gary and Lynn, if you can take that away and work with that.
Yes. Thank you, Peter. That would be good, because the Northfields area is sort of away from the town centre, whereas with the recreation ground we've got the Abbey Lawns over the other side of the road, and then not far from the Wellhead area as well. So to have somewhere along Northfields would be quite good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it fits in with having one area in each town that we can that we can put in.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I seem to have lost everybody's picture now.
Yeah, somebody's.
I don't know what I've done.
You need to click hide stage in the centre of the screen.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
You're back, all of you. Thank
Come
you.
back to you, Phil. But can I ask you to keep it short, because there are other people wanting to ask questions.
Well, I'd like to ask, since we've heard from Lynn, and I welcome Lynn on the meeting, I'd like to ask, at the end, when we, at our February meeting, I asked specifically about consultation and said that I would support this, providing, and I'd support the Jubilee Park proposal in Deeping St James, providing Jubilee Park themselves and Deeping St James Parish Council were consulted. I was assured that that would be the very next step by Lynn at that stage, and I would like to ask why. I'm now told that there was no consultation on the Deeping St James plan, that it seems to have been scrapped before any consultation. What's the point of coming to a meeting in February with a bunch of slides and saying, here we are, and we all give our feedback on that? I've put that out on Facebook, and now we're told, oh, no, we decided to go somewhere else. I'd like to hear from Lynn.
Shall I answer that?
Yes, okay, Gary.
Sorry, Councillor Dilks. I mean, as I said before, the actual resolution from the committee was, as I understood it, and is recorded in the notes, to consult on one initiative, one rewilding site per town. And so that is, I'm afraid, what we did. I've already noted the request to give a little bit more information as to why we consulted on that one versus the other one that was presented at the last meeting. But the clear steer we got from the committee was that only one proposal should be consulted on per town, and that is what we've done.
Okay, we'll move across to Ashley. Councillor Ashley Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. That's not the steer that I remember from the last meeting, but the minutes never lie, so that's fine. It was my impression that all 4 schemes would be consulted going forwards, and why would we as a committee want to limit the amount of schemes that could go forward? It's just nonsense. I wanted to come back, Chair, on your comment that the paper that I proposed at the request of Councillor Mosley you hadn't seen. You did get a copy of it on the 28th of May, and you were copied into all the subsequent emails.
Ashley, I do apologise, I've just found it.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear, really. Have we got a recommendation yet that we go forward with the 2 schemes that have made it through boot camp?
Just about to come to that.
Then I'd like to propose that we go forward with the 2 schemes that have made it through boot camp, and additionally that we look for other schemes and that we consult potential stakeholders in other potential areas where similar schemes could go forwards. And third recommendation, that we review how we've got on with this at a later meeting of the Overview Scrutiny Committee.
Could I just throw in there, I don't know whether you want to append anything to your recommendation, Ashley. I think it would be useful if as moving forward, when these schemes start to have an impact on the communities, that we get some feedback from them to steer that, because it's important, I think, that rather than it just be sort of councillors saying, well, it's a lovely thing to do and we want it, that actually we get confirmation and support, both good and bad, whatever it may be, from the local residents that are actually able to enjoy or not enjoy, depending on their perspective, the things that we've implemented.
Oh, absolutely. Through you, Chair. I think that we should have consulted these stakeholders before we even looked at sites. I think that we've got it all back to front, really. However, we shouldn't stop consulting stakeholders now. And as I know you've read the report that I can't show you now, the first thing is education. We can't, as Gloria said, we can't just leave the grass uncut without people knowing why. We've got to have a proper communications plan, which undoubtedly will involve standing a cabinet member in front of one of the schemes and doing 15 press releases about it. I mean, we've got to get people to know what's going on through Twitter, through Facebook, and even through letters through people's doors, so that people don't assume that it's a lazy grounds maintenance officer when actually it's a very positive biodiversity initiative. So yeah, happy to add in something along those lines. Whatever it was you said, I'll happily add as a fourth recommendation.
I can't remember now. Sorry. It was good.
Jake's taking notes.
Good.
Jack, can I have what was the recommendations for that last one? I missed the last one by Ashley.
He's gone off.
It's all right. No, I am here. So I took that down as Ashley has raised the fourth recommendation that the council advertises the positives of rewilding.
Right. Okay. So
I thought it was about us engaging with the public and gaining all of this, the relevant feedback. I thought that was what it was, but maybe I got it wrong.
It was too, obviously.
So I think, sorry if I can rewrite it, Jack. The fourth recommendation is to positively engage with stakeholders and residents about the schemes. Positively engage and consult with residents and stakeholders regarding the ongoing schemes.
No problem. Let's write that up now.
Okay. Should we vote on all four at the same time, or do we need to do them one at a time, Zena?
If there's general consensus, you can vote on all four at the same time.
Is everybody happy to vote on all four at one go?
Yes.
I've had enough. I'm off.
Okay, everybody. All those in favour of recommendations?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we might need to do it.
So do you want Jack to run through the names again?
Cool.
Start with Councillor Cottier.
4.
Councillor Baxter.
4.
Councillor Dilks. Oh, he left, is he? He left, isn't he?
Yeah.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Ray Wotton.
4.
And Councillor Linda Wotton.
4.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to, I believe that's carried then. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, which is the work programme. The only thing added to it is the report from the task and finish group for the next meeting. We've got nothing in.
Councillor Cottier, would you like me to talk through this item briefly?
Yes.
Okay, so as you can all see, we've got the draft blank work programme on there at the moment, as this is the first meeting of this municipal year, and unfortunately the last meeting of the last municipal year was cancelled due to the COVID crisis, so we are, as it were, starting again this year with a bit of a blank slate. As you can see, we've got already scheduled for the July meeting the performance indicators, and we've had the indication from Councillor Baxter that he would like the report on what those indicators will be. We've also had the request at the July meeting for a written update report from the climate change task and finish group. We've got a meeting scheduled in October, one in December, one in January and one in April. There's nothing other than the biannual performance in those spaces at the moment. It's not necessary to add items to them right now. But if anyone does have any particular areas of concern that they'd like to slot in at this stage, then this is the opportunity to do so. I'm sure items will come up as we go through the year, so it's perfectly okay if there are blank spaces at this stage. I'm sure they will be filled.
Okay, there is a list of our remit on page 113, and I believe Zena, we requested what actually policies were actually underneath those.
Yep, if you refer to page 113 where it shows the remits, anywhere where there was a policy that's within our remit, I've included a link to that policy, and also any information on whether there's a review date for that policy coming up. So as you can see, the taxi and private vehicle driver and operator licensing policy currently under review. That was at our meeting today. We're also responsible for wild animal licensing policy. There's no local policy on that, but there is national policy. I shouldn't imagine it's an issue that comes up at Skdc often enough to warrant a specific policy from us on it. We've got the gambling and lotteries licensing policy, which isn't due for renewal until January 2022. The alcohol, entertainment and leisure licensing policy, which is due for renewal in due for review in January 2021. So that will be within this municipal year for this committee to review. The animal welfare licensing, again, there's guidance available for that, but no specific policy. I don't imagine it's an issue that comes up often enough to warrant anything beyond the guidance. Business trade and licensing policy, again, guidance only, no specific policy. And I believe, tattoo licensing and hygiene rating system policy, again, there's guidance available on that without a specific policy behind it.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll leave that with people to actually think of if they want to bring any of those up. We'll leave it as that.
Hello?
Oh, sorry, Ashley.
I have requested to speak in the comments.
Okay. Okay, Ashley.
That's okay. I refer members to page 12 of the agenda pack. The last item on the notes of the last meeting. Bullet point 43. We agreed that there will be a presentation from the Internal Drainage Board. There will be items on boiler replacement and plumbing options, the SKDC cycle to work scheme, environmental performance indicators and taxis with nailed down. But those other ones, we've asked for those. Why are they not on the work plan?
Okay, Zena, can we add those to this work plan coming up?
Yeah, sure. I'll add those on. Is there any specific time frame that anyone would like this considered? I would add as well that the Internal Drainage Board were due to come to our last meeting, which was unfortunately cancelled. So I do apologise that that got missed off going forward onto this municipal year.
Can I just come in there and say something as I'm on the board of the Drainage Board? Hello?
Yes, Jackie, go ahead.
Yes, they've had to put back their meetings because of the problem with the bug, as I call it. They do have their AGM next Monday. I will be going to it, and we'll see what I can get. But they've had a lot of problems because they've had severe water problems going back from before Christmas, and some of the terrific floods that we have had in the county have only just started to be cleared up. So they have been very busy dealing with flood situations as well, as much as anything else. But I will remind them, and perhaps we can invite them to another meeting.
Ashley, would would it be okay if we invited them to the October one? That would mean it'd be slightly outside of the possible scope of the.
I don't mind. I just didn't want the what we'd agreed at the last meeting to fall off the agenda again. I think if we decide something, we should go ahead with it. I don't mind if it's next year, as long as we don't forget that that was what we intended to do.
We'll add it to the list, and we'll get them as soon as we can. But unfortunately, with the COVID thing, we're all kind of.
Oh yeah, I understand the reasons for it being postponed, but I don't understand why it fell off altogether. The same as cycling, the cycling thing. I've been asking for cycling, and more generally than just staff cycling, for years, and it's never got. It
just got missed due to the.
It's always a year away. It never gets to the top. Same with biodiversity, although we seem to be making some progress on that.
Right. Okay, can we add that to the lists? And
yeah, I'll add those on to the meeting to be confirmed section of the work programme, because obviously we're not quite sure when staff will be back in the office in terms of like the single-use plastic item. Reduction of single-use plastics in the office obviously isn't as relevant now as it once was, because there aren't as many staff in the office, but there are also new issues that there weren't before, such as increased use of single-use plastic PPE. So I will add it onto the to be confirmed section, but I'm not sure at what stage we will know what our new normal looks like in relation to people in the office and single-use plastic in the office. The same with the cycling one. I know the focus on the work that we had done on that so far had been to do with staff cycling, which obviously there aren't staff in the office at the same level at the moment as there were before, so the picture on that has changed as well. So again, I'll add it to the to be confirmed section of the work programme.
Okay.
Could I just remind you, Zena, that we have staff at the depot who do cycle to work. So cycling to work would still be relevant even if there are less staff going into the office. We still have the same amount of critical staff heading down to the depot.
Okay, of course.
Yeah. Could I just also point out that there are, I believe it's 3 councillors that represent the district council at the drainage board meetings, but again, because of the problems that we've had, there have been virtually no meetings at all of any of the drainage boards. So you can always go and ask your representatives, because they are kept up in touch with information coming from the drainage boards.
We understand that, Jackie. It's just if it's on the list, then it's something we asked for. So I know Ashley is very determined to actually get them onto the books, so we'll get them done. That's not a problem.
Thank you. And just one more, Chair. The December meeting is probably the best time to talk about the success or otherwise of these rewilding schemes. I think if we can talk about it in December, then we'll be ahead of the growing season for the following year. So if we've got any brilliant ideas for improving it, expanding it, or knocking it on the head, then December would be the right time to review.
I'll ask Peter about that, because it's...
well, fine. Yeah. I'm happy to talk about it at any time, but I agree that at the end of the season, when there might or might not have been an impact, and that we might or might not have some good information, would be a good time to. I'm happy to keep the conversation going and run with it.
Right. Okay, so can you add that to the December one then, please?
Yeah, I'll add that on to the December one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 10. Any other business? For special services, which I haven't. Has anybody got anything that's necessary? No. With that, that's everything. We'll call the meeting closed.
Right.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
John,
Thank you, everyone.
the meeting.
Stay safe.
And you all.